So, pretty big news today, at least in my opinion. I think Trump, with an announcement today, has more or less confirmed who he wants to lead the party after he's gone. One of the first videos that I posted here on YouTube that did really well was a video called Where Did the Republicans Go After Trump? It was about 2 months ago, and it was just me thinking about ways the party might change after he's gone. And I only referred to, in terms of a specific candidate who might take the reins and be the presidential candidate after Trump is done. I only made reference to one person, one candidate that I thought was not too offensive to moderates or maybe people from across the aisle, somebody who had a track record of running for president, somebody who had massive voter appeal amongst America's largest growing demographic, and that is the person that Trump has just confirmed will be his Secretary of State in his second administration, and that is Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio is a fascinating character in American politics, and he got his start in 2010 when he was elected to the Senate from Florida as part of a massive blowback against the Democrats from a grassroots conservative movement that you might remember called the Tea Party. During Obama's presidency, the Tea Party was a radical grassroots organization of conservatives that basically came together with pretty much the sole purpose of opposing Obama at every possible turn. So while the Tea Party is sweeping the nation, Marco Rubio is entering the Republican primary for that Senate seat that he won in the end. And he went up against the then incumbent governor, the Republican governor of Florida at the time. But the Tea Party really latched onto Marco Rubio, primarily because the Republican governor of Florida was pretty unpopular with diehard conservatives, and they accused him of being too supportive of Obama's recovery plans after the 2008 global financial crisis. This became the deciding factor of the Republican primary that year. The Tea Party really hijacked the race. Marco Rubio soared in the polls, and the then governor actually dropped out of the Republican primary and ran in the Senate race as an independent. But in the actual election, a three-way contest between Marco Rubio, an independent governor, and the Democratic candidate, Marco Rubio really swept the floor with both of them and was elected to the Senate. Now, this is where Rubio gets kind of interesting because the movement that propelled him to success and actually got him into the Senate was actually a movement that would go on to basically denounce him, as it were, because Rubio wasn't exactly the die-hard, anti-immigration, conservative poster child that the Tea Party really wanted him to be. Now, this might give you a sense of how different politics were in 2013, but a small bipartisan group of senators of 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, the Republicans including Rubio, John McCain, and Lindsey Graham, all came together to basically pitch a massive overhaul of how immigration worked in the United States. So this platform laid out by these 8 senators was really led by Rubio himself. He was the champion of the cause they were presenting, but pretty controversially, in part of the reforms that him and the other 7 senators were proposing was that after 10 years of illegal residency in the United States, you could apply for permanent residency. And if you came here as a young child and had been here for 5 years, you could apply for American citizenship. And the Republican Party at the time entirely rejected that proposal. Now, the reason that those senators did that, particularly the Republican ones, is because they realized that the largest growing community, the largest growing ethnic group in the United States is Hispanics. And if they don't start some sort of outreach to that demographic, then it's going to come back to bite them over the next 2 decades or so. So these senators are basically forced to drop this plan when it's clear that the Republican Party wants nothing to do with it. And Rubio just kind of has to drop it and accept the state of what the Republican Party is. He runs in 2016 for president and does better than some, but comes second in his own state and then drops out at that point. Rubio would actually go on to have a pretty strong working relationship with the Trump administration, even working with them in a formal capacity to manage relationships with countries in Latin America. But Rubio wasn't exactly a pushover when it came to working with Trump. In 2019, most famously, in terms of his opposition to Trump, he voted against the then president's efforts to declare a national emergency to secure funding for a border wall. And actually, Rubio worked with Democrats to get 59 senators in total to vote against President Trump in trying to declare a national emergency. Rubio also never really got on board with Trump's 2020 stolen election conspiracy. He voted to certify the election, and as early as late November of 2020, he was already calling Biden president-elect. So he never really got on board with Trump on that issue. Despite all of that, Trump and Rubio maintained a pretty good and friendly relationship after his presidency and over the last 4 years. It was even rumored early on that he was a favorite to be Trump's VP for his run this year, which of course is very unlikely to actually happen because Rubio would have had to move out of state and maybe risk his seat in the Senate because vice presidents and presidents on a ticket, according to the rules of the Electoral College, cannot be from the same state if they both want the votes from that specific state. But the main point being that the two get along very well. And I would actually argue that picking Rubio as Secretary of State means a lot more than if he had picked him as Vice President. The reason I say that is that most people think, oh yeah, the VP is the obvious successor that comes along with it. The Vice President doesn't really do much, so to say. I mean, most of the time, the Vice President doesn't even do his or her own job in the Senate and delegates it to someone else while they make public appearances and just go around trying to protect the reputation of the president. The Secretary of State, on the other hand, is an office of significant consequence and power. For my viewers who live in parliamentary democracies, the Secretary of State is basically the foreign minister, one of the highest ranking members of cabinet whose job it is to maintain foreign relations with every other country in the world. The Secretary of State, if it's given to a politician alone, somebody who has like aspirations to a higher office, which Rubio clearly does, having run for president back in 2016, what that office does is give them a reputation and an opportunity to succeed on a global stage. We've actually seen the other side of the aisle try this recently. Who was Obama's successor? Who ran for the Democrats in 2016 after his second term was done? Hillary Clinton. Who was Barack Obama's Secretary of State from 2009 until 2013? Hillary Clinton. That did come to bite her in the end, but you can understand why she took up that position. Being Secretary of State gives you authority. You have to go onto the world stage and speak for the entirety of the United States. And of course, it can backfire. Just ask Hillary Clinton about her emails. But if you play it well, you will have an established history of being a competent politician who can stand up to dictators, who can stand up to other world leaders, somebody who should be respected. If you're an American president and you want people to see who your successor is and you want them to see them a lot and what they're capable of and you want to give them experience, don't make them vice president. Don't have them do nothing, push pencils around and basically smile for the camera occasionally. Give them a position of power where people will see that they can speak for the United States and do it well. You don't make them vice president, you make them Secretary of State. It's what Obama did. And I'm pretty sure it's what Trump's trying to do now.